coming out of the ferry. Now my target is to look for the Malta Parliament by Renzo Piano. So I have to check Google Map, find a shaded area. So I'm by the dock, and it says here that it's approximately 10-minute walk. I'm surrounded by boats, so I should get start walking. And as I'm walking, there's a restaurant that has an interesting design to it. It's called Cockneys. And what's interesting about a tourist destination like this, like in every corner there's an opportunity for business, such as this one, a cafe, a restaurant just by the dock of the public ferry. And here is probably another restaurant. And I find the design interesting in a way that the wooden windows are consistent. I'm just not sure about the signage, but the architecture is pretty striking and very consistent with the material palette. So they have some shaded area, and I would say that even though the structure of the shading with the cloth, that like structure, you can see that they're trying to mix modern and old, and it fits really well with the old stone. So this is the map of Valleta, and it reminds me of Intramuros. It's still on a grid-like pattern, and it's still surrounded by fortification, just like Intramuros. Very similar. I'm not sure if Intramuros had the same color palette, but this is more of a limestone type of color. How medieval cities were arranged, how they arranged their buildings. You can see a lot of cars parked on the street, but it's still a walkable experience. So wish me luck finding the Malta Parliament. But that is the church, peeking from those buildings. Lot of charm. Lots of things happening on the street. And of course, if you are a modern architect wherein you want everything curated, this place is not that kind of place. And this is a really interesting staircase. Probably this is a sloping site, and then they just designed the town to adjust to the terrain of this island. Another street showing the dome, the famous dome in Valleta. I've got to find out the name. So you can see a lot of pretty buildings here. As I walk the street, you can notice the dominant window setting. Not a lot of commercial activity yet, maybe because this is not the city center, But I'm curious how the city center looks like. So apparently I was walking the wrong way, that way, and then when I double check Google Map, I'm supposed to go this way. So it's nice that here they encourage people to walk, and this is a cobbled area, not really cobbled, but the pavement is different. It's really special for walking, but you still see some cars passing by, some are parked. Really a nice walking experience, even though it's going to be an exercise for some, because it's an uphill walk. Such a nice city. So if you're an Instagrammer, this is definitely a haven. I don't think you'll miss there's not one spot of this place is not good for Instagramming. Really walking on the side street of Malta, and look at the crowd. A lot of people in this main street, and I can see Renzo Piano's building already from afar. A lot of people. I didn't expect it to be this crowded. So I guess Valleta is really the center of tourism here. Like if you want to see the action, the shops, and the cafes, well, I think it's a must go. But a lot of major European cities have this kind of streetscape and environment. Nice. So I'm walking towards the parliament, and you can already see somehow that it's ultra modern compared to the buildings around it. So I reckon that the column the column is actually an authentic classical building. Beautiful architecture around. This is a ruin of, I have yet to learn what it is, but definitely an interesting situation here. So I'm at the steps of, I'm not sure if it's a temple. I'll get back to you regarding it, but look at the Renzo Piano masterpiece in Valleta. Look at those details. God, I need exercise. It's fenced up. It's barricaded. I'm not sure if we're allowed to go in, but the details are on another level. You can see that Renzo Piano used the same stone as the old stones of the city. That way it's not so contrasting, but the design is definitely juxtaposed against the backdrop, the historical backdrop of Valleta. So let me go back to the ruins, because I thought it was something else, but it used to be the opera house of the city, and it was bombed during World War II. And originally the city wanted the parliament to be constructed in this opera house, and they want to demolish the entire ruins of the opera house, and but Renzo Piano didn't want it, and instead he proposed that the parking lot just beside it become the site of the parliament. And now it's an open theater, really interesting ones. It echoes the Colosseum, which is also open, or the amphitheaters in Rome or in Italy. So so this is what you have. So unfortunately the security is tight inside the parliament. It's understandable because it is a government building and security is a priority. The idea of Renzo Piano is that it becomes part of the city gate. It's like it's made of two massive volumes made of limestone, and you know that it is cut in its precise size. I read it's laser cut, and you can see that the difference between the old limestone and the actual the building, this new building. You know, it's made by technology, and you can see the windows are like abstract perforations, and according to Renzo Piano, it's meant to represent the map of Gozo and Valleta, if I'm not mistaken. You can correct me if I'm wrong. So you can see on the fretted windows like an abstraction of those city maps, like a pixelated version of that. And instead of having a very flat window, they laser cut some of the stones so that it will have some sort of a sun shading, and then creates that interesting texture on the walls. So interesting enough, you see birds perching on the textured surface. So I'm not familiar with Valleta's map, but I would think that this is what the architect was trying to say. And if you're a modernist, you try to avoid ornamentation. And according to architecture critics, this is the way that Renzo Piano does his embellishment on buildings. So this is the open ground floor. Normally, you have an open space, and then you have an enclosed space that is probably enclosed by glass, so that the appearance still feels very open. I was walking around it, but I was stopped by the security, which is understandable. So that is the volume 1 and volume 2. One of them is a chamber, and one of them are offices. So I'm approaching the gate, and according to what I read, there was an arch, a classical arch by an Italian architect, if I'm not mistaken, but it was replaced by it was removed by Renzo Piano. So it is part of the entry arrival, the entry experience of Valleta. So I'm walking towards the entrance of Valleta, and you can see that there was a moat in this fortified city. Really deep moat. It's kind of scary actually. So you can see an elevator incorporated with a historic wall, and you can see the old walls, and then the laser cut limestone walls with the elevator. Really beautiful work. And as you approach, you have the old buildings, and I think it's a residential. I can see somebody I think looking out to the window, and then and this is the Parliament building. Noticeably, the Parliament building, while it is modern, it's not very striking, just like other modern progressive buildings that are iconic, designed by known architects. And Renzo Piano is known for respecting the contextual character of the city, as tries to continue the story of the city through the architecture, and in this case through the materiality, through the height of the building, and making a dialogue between the public space and the private space, which is, you know, debatable if it's really a public space. So I'm not sure if security is very strict as I go up, but this is one way to view the other side of the building. You can see the windows. So instead of having a flat wall, as I've mentioned earlier, it's not just about texture, it also creates some sort of a recess on the wall. And since it's fretted, in a way it's some form of embellishment or ornamentation, it really lends a very interesting facade. And the ground floor, while you have stilts, The stones are load bearing, whereas this one is the stones are more lightweight, and used as an enclosure for the second floor. So I wouldn't know if the second floor is the chamber, the discussion chamber, or the offices. We wouldn't really know, but anyway, it's not that important since we're not really allowed to go inside. So it's really interesting that we're allowed to go around it, but I guess the interior areas are restricted. So I'm always fascinated that you have a very secured building such as this one, and then you have an elevator that probably provides you access inside. In many of the design exercises, this is actually a question, because you are providing more access points and security weakness areas for the building. So as I walk along this wall, very historical, and then beside it is the parliament with a nice sunken garden, and we can see the offices below it and a garden. Really a nice view from here, and you can see the complexity and the simplicity at the same time of the design, and how the architect tried to respect the ruins of the old walls and what remains of it. And I think I mentioned earlier that while architects try to be very impressive with the architecture, this one is kind of a little humble, doesn't really shout, doesn't really take away the attention away from the city. And according to critics, this is one way to make the building become part of the people. So that's why it's not too imposing, it's not too authoritative, just like other government buildings for that matter. Because they normally, when you have government buildings, they are imposing, they are monumental because they want to be a symbol of authority. So again, these are the two volumes connected by a steel bridge. Really interesting play of volumes and the negative space that creates the garden or the courtyard. How wish we can go inside, but I reckon that the planning will be a typical office inside and a typical discussion chamber, but I could be wrong. But definitely really interesting government building for Malta, because you don't see a lot of progressive buildings here because it's very historical. It's a fortified city, and I think this is a very identifiable modern landmark in Malta. So I'm still standing beside the fortified wall and looking at this view of the building, and then you have the open amphitheater as a view from here. So really a good example of how you can integrate modern architecture with the city. So also fascinating that the building is coming to life when you see people crossing from on the bridge from one end to the other. So I guess that's it. I can see a model. I don't know if you can see it, but it would have been nice if you were allowed to go inside and take footage of the model. These are really massive, what do you call that, floor lights. Normally it's this size like that. This is really massive. Maybe it's meant for this wall because it's also massive. Really enjoying this view. If you're an architect, it's like probably for other people this is just, you know, one of those modern buildings, but if you design and you do details and then, you know, the intricacies of creating an architecture piece like this, you know, you appreciate it more, and yeah, and enjoy being here. So that's the architecture geek in me. So it's also nice to see the people just hanging around because the place is very comfortable You can sit on the pavement, you can sit on anywhere actually. And again, beautiful integration with the old city. So so that's it for the Malta Parliament by Renzo Piano.